What would you do if the airline you built with your own hands told you that you didn't belong? Dr. Simone Hayes, a poised and powerful black CEO, boarded her own company's flight expecting nothing more than a quiet journey. Instead, she was told to leave her seat in first class. The humiliation was sharp. The silence from those around her was louder. But what the crew didn't know was who she really was. Why did the staff target her? How many others had been quietly pushed aside before her? And how far would Simone go to uncover the truth hiding behind corporate walls? This is a story of quiet power, buried histories, and a woman who refused to let injustice be the final word. It's about the moments on an airplane that revealed something far bigger, something that would shake the airline industry to its core. By the end, you'll see how one calm decision can ripple into systemic change, and why dignity is never negotiable. If you believe respect is a right, not a privilege, hit that like button, share this story, and subscribe so you don't miss what happens next. Now, let's step into the cabin where it all began. The jet bridge was unusually quiet for a Friday evening flight. Outside, the late Chicago sun was sinking into a gold haze, the light bouncing off the silver fuselage of Aurora Air Flight 472 bound for New York. Dr. Simone Hayes stepped forward with an unhurried pace. Her carry-on was a simple black roller bag, her jacket a deep navy, the kind of understated style that spoke more of confidence than display. No designer logos, no entourage, no hint to the casual observer that she ran one of the most successful airline groups in the country. She scanned her boarding pass at the gate. The scanner beeped green. Seat 2A. First class window. Exactly as planned. Simone preferred boarding toward the end, avoiding the pre-departure bustle. It gave her time to watch, to feel the energy of the cabin before takeoff. She was, after all, here to quietly observe service standards. Inside the aircraft, first class glowed with warm overhead lighting. Plush seats and soft gray leather lined either side of the aisle, each framed by polished wood accents. The air carried that subtle scent of fresh upholstery and citrus cleaner. She rolled her bag to her seat. A flight attendant in a crisp navy uniform looked up from arranging a tray of champagne flutes. His name badge read Colin Mercer. His posture was immaculate, his smile professional until his eyes landed on Simone. "Good evening," he said, but his voice had a strange edge to it. "May I see your boarding pass?" Simone handed it over without comment. Colin scanned it, glanced at the seat, then back at her. His smile thinned. This says 2A. Are you sure you're in the right cabin, ma'am?" She tilted her head slightly. "That's what it says." Colin's gaze swept over her outfit, the tailored blazer, the pressed white blouse, the plain leather tote, and something in his expression shifted. It was subtle, but Simone had seen that look before. Not curiosity, assessment. "This section is reserved for our first-class guests," Colin continued. Simone kept her voice calm. "And that's what I am." For a moment, he seemed to be weighing something in his mind. Then he handed back the pass. "We've had some issues lately with people sitting in seats that aren't theirs. I just wanted to make sure there wasn't a mix-up." Simone nodded once, slid the boarding pass into her jacket pocket, and sat down. A young flight attendant appeared from the galley, placing a glass of water on the armrest. Her name tag read, Lena Park. She smiled politely, but her eyes flickered between Simone and Colin as if she'd already sensed tension. Simone sipped the water, her eyes drifting to the cabin door where more passengers were boarding. Businessmen with expensive watches, a couple in matching resort wear, a tall man in a tailored suit who gave her a quick glance before storing his briefcase overhead. She opened her tote and pulled out a slim notebook. Habit. Every time she traveled, she jotted quick notes, observations about crew behavior, passenger interactions, even the quality of the welcome drink. Colin reappeared, standing at the edge of her row. "Ma'am, just to clarify, did someone upgrade you to this seat?" Simone closed the notebook. "No. Purchased outright." Her brow lifted. "Yes. Is there an issue?" He smiled again, but it was a smile without warmth. "I'm just making sure everything's in order. Sometimes our standards for this section aren't clear to all passengers." The words sat heavy in the air. Simone watched him for a long beat, her mind noting every syllable, the faint emphasis on standards, the almost imperceptible pause before passengers. "Everything is in order," she said finally. Colin nodded once, but lingered a moment longer than necessary before moving down the aisle. Across the cabin, Lena watched the exchange. She had been on the job for less than a year, but she'd seen enough to know when a conversation was about more than a seat assignment. She felt the familiar knot in her stomach, the one that came when she wanted to speak up, but knew the hierarchy aboard didn't leave room for her voice. Simone leaned back in her seat, her mind working quietly. She'd dealt with situations like this before, though rarely inside one of her own aircraft. Colin Mercer didn't know who she was. That much was obvious, and maybe that was a good thing. It would let her see exactly how far this would go. The boarding announcement played over the speakers, welcoming passengers and reminding them to stow carry-ons. A man in the row ahead adjusted his tie and glanced over his shoulder at her. He didn't smile. The minutes ticked by. Simone watched as Colin greeted each first-class passenger with a bright, rehearsed warmth that had been absent in their exchange. He laughed with the couple in 3C and 3D, complimented the suit of the man in 1B, offered champagne to the woman in 2C without hesitation. When he returned to Simone's row, it was with a tone that sounded almost administrative. "Ma'am, may I see your ID along with your boarding pass?" Her eyes narrowed, just slightly. "You've already seen my boarding pass. It's just for our records," he replied. Simone didn't move. "Are you asking every passenger for ID?" His smile faltered. "I ask when I need to verify. Verify what a pause. The kind of pause that says more than words. Nothing, ma'am. Just procedure." She handed over her ID, watching his face as he glanced at it. No apology, no change in expression, just a curt nod before walking away. From the corner of her eye, Simone noticed Lena shifting uncomfortably. Their eyes met briefly. The young attendant's lips pressed into a thin line, as if she was silently acknowledging, "I saw that." The jet bridge door closed with a dull thud. The safety announcement began. Simone fastened her seatbelt, her mind already setting a quiet plan into motion. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. As the engines roared to life and the plane began its slow taxi, Simone slipped her phone from her jacket and tapped out a short message to Daniel Brooks. Her thumbs moved quickly, each word precise. "We may have a problem on Flight 472. I'll keep you posted." She put the phone away and folded her hands in her lap. Outside, the runway stretched into a band of fading light. Inside, the cabin felt smaller than it should. The seatbelt sign dinged. The aircraft rolled forward. Simone's gaze settled on Colin as he moved methodically through his pre-departure checks. Calm, controlled, watching, waiting. She had no idea yet just how far he was willing to push, and he had no idea that she was the one person on this plane who could bring his career to an abrupt end. The wheels left the ground. Chicago dropped away beneath them, and the tension in two-way rose quietly with the altitude. The seatbelt sign was still on when Colin approached again. His expression was courteous enough to pass for professional, but there was something beneath it, a stiffness in his jaw, a guarded look in his eyes. Simone had seen it before in boardrooms, in luxury hotels, in restaurants where someone had decided she was out of place before she had spoken a word. "Ma'am," he began, resting one hand lightly on the headrest of the seat in front of her. "There has been a last-minute change to the seating chart. I'm going to have to ask you to move to another section of the aircraft." Simone looked at him steadily. "What section would that be?" Colin's smile did not reach his eyes. "We have a premium economy seat open in row 10. It will be more comfortable than coach, and we can offer you a complimentary drink." Simone closed her notebook and placed it in her lap. "I purchased 2A. I'll remain in 2A. He shifted his weight. "This seat is being reassigned to another passenger who is a frequent flyer with specific needs. It would make things easier for everyone if you would cooperate." Simone's voice stayed calm. "Are you asking any other passengers in first class to give up their seats?" "That's not relevant," he said quickly. "It is to me," Simone replied. Her tone was quiet but unyielding. From across the aisle, a man in a charcoal suit glanced up from his laptop, curiosity flickering in his eyes. Behind Colin, Lena stood with a tray of glasses, her gaze darting between them. She looked like she wanted to speak but thought better of it. Simone tilted her head slightly. "Is there a reason you're asking me specifically?" Colin hesitated. The pause was long enough to be an answer. Then he gave a practiced shrug. "Ma'am, I'm asking because sometimes passengers are more comfortable in other sections." "Passengers like me?" she asked. The question hung in the air. Colin's lips pressed together, and when he spoke again, his voice was softer, as if trying to slip past the weight of what he had just implied. "I just think you'd find the other section a better fit." Simone could feel the subtle shift in the cabin. Passengers in nearby seats were listening now, their eyes flicking back and forth as if they were watching a slow-burning fuse. The air felt thicker, charged with something unspoken. She leaned back slightly. "Mr. Mercer, I am comfortable where I am." His smile thinned. "Please don't make this more difficult than it needs to be." Her fingers curled around the armrest. She had no intention of raising her voice. That was never how she handled moments like this. She had learned long ago that the calmest person in the room often had the most power. Simone glanced past him toward the front galley where Lena was standing, frozen, her knuckles white against the tray she was holding. The young attendant's eyes met hers for just a second, and Simone could read the silent apology there. Colin straightened. "I'll give you a moment to reconsider." When he walked away, the quiet in the cabin was sharper somehow, like the pause between lightning and thunder. Simone took a slow breath and reached for her tote. She slipped out her phone, typed a short message to Daniel Brooks, Flight 472. "First class. Possible discrimination. Will update." She slid the phone back and closed her eyes for a moment, letting the hum of the engine settle her thoughts. This was not the first time she had been underestimated or told she did not belong, but something about hearing it in her own company's aircraft added a new edge to the insult. A shadow fell across her seat. When she opened her eyes, Lena was there, setting a fresh glass of water on her table. She spoke so softly it was almost a whisper. "I think you should stay in your seat. Something isn't right." Simone studied her face. The sincerity was there, along with a trace of fear. She gave a small nod. "Thank you." Lena moved on, her posture straight. But Simone noticed the quick glance she cast toward Colin, as if measuring how much he had seen. The aircraft had leveled off now. The fasten seatbelt sign chimed off, and Colin returned, this time with a printed manifest in his hand. "Ma'am," he said, "I'm going to need you to move now. The passenger assigned to this seat is boarding late from a connecting flight and will be here shortly." Simone's brow lifted. "We're in the air. Mr. Mercer." For the first time, a crack appeared in his composure. "It's a matter of keeping the section aligned with our standards. Certain seats are designated for certain types of guests." She held his gaze. "And I'm not one of those types." His answer came too quickly. "I didn't say that. You didn't have to." He looked away, then back again with a harder edge. "Please collect your belongings." "I will not." There was no anger in her voice, only certainty. And that certainty unsettled him more than anything else she could have said. Across the cabin, Tasha Monroe, a travel blogger with a knack for spotting stories before they made headlines, lowered her phone into her lap and pressed record. She had caught the last few exchanges, the tension, the careful but cutting language. Experience told her she was witnessing something that would not end quietly. Colin straightened. "Very well. I'll have to escalate this." "Do what you need to do," Simone replied. He turned sharply and walked toward the galley. Simone could see him leaning in to speak with Lena, who shook her head almost imperceptibly. Then he disappeared into the cockpit. And moments later the captain's voice came over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're addressing a seating matter in the forward cabin. Thank you for your patience." The words were neutral, but the subtext was clear. Colin had framed her as a problem to the entire aircraft. Simone sat perfectly still, her mind already moving 3 steps ahead. She knew the policy manuals better than anyone. She had written some of them herself, and she knew there was nothing in them that could justify removing a passenger from a paid seat based on the kind of vague language Colin had been using. Her fingers brushed the notebook in her lap. She began jotting down everything she could remember. The time, the exact wording, the names of the passengers who were close enough to hear. From behind, she felt a gentle touch on her shoulder. "Lena," leaning in just enough to be heard. "I'm sorry," she whispered. Simone gave her a faint smile. "It's not your fault, but thank you." Colin returned, his expression set. "Ma'am, the captain has authorized me to reseat you for the remainder of the flight." Simone looked past him toward the cockpit door. "Then I'll speak to the captain myself." "That won't be possible," Colin said quickly. She tilted her head, studying him. "I think it will." And in that moment, she decided. Whatever he thought was going to happen next, he was in for a surprise. Simone could feel the change in the air. It was subtle at first, a slight hush in the row behind her, the way conversations seemed to trail off when Colin walked past. People were listening now, even if they pretended not to be. The hum of the engines filled the silence between each exchange, and every word carried further than it should. Colin returned from the cockpit, his shoulders squared, the manifest still in his hand. His voice was level, but his eyes were sharp. "Ma'am, we need to resolve this. The captain has confirmed that you will be more comfortable in premium economy. Let's gather your things." Simone met his gaze without moving. "Mr. Mercer, I am already comfortable, and I am exactly where my ticket says I should be." His jaw tightened. "It isn't only about comfort. We have standards to maintain for this section." She let the words hang there. "Standards? The kind of word that could mean anything when someone wanted it to. She had heard it in boardrooms used as code for dress, for accent, for skin color. It was rarely about actual quality of service. "What standards are you referring to?" she asked. He hesitated for a beat too long. "Seating allocation, guest experience, overall atmosphere." Simone leaned back, her eyes steady. "And you believe my presence here is not in line with those things?" The faintest flicker crossed his face, a mix of irritation and something else, recognition that she wasn't going to be easily moved. From her seat in business class, just behind the curtain, Tasha Monroe angled her phone slightly to get a clearer shot. She could see Colin's posture, Simone's stillness, the way Lena lingered near the galley pretending to sort napkins while keeping her ears open. Colin shifted his weight. "I'm asking you to trust my judgment." "I don't," Simone said plainly. For a moment, the two of them stayed locked in that quiet standoff. Then Colin straightened and raised his voice just enough for the nearby passengers to hear. "Ma'am, people like you are usually happier in sections that better match their travel needs." The phrase landed like a sharp crack in the stillness. A man across the aisle frowned and looked away. A woman 2 rows back whispered something to her companion. Lena's head jerked up, her eyes widening. She knew exactly what had just been said, and so did everyone else who heard it. Simone did not flinch. "People like me?" she repeated. Colin's eyes narrowed as if he realized too late what he had said out loud. "I didn't mean you did," Simone said softly. "And I will remember everything you've said today." The engines droned on. The seatbelt sign glowed above them. But the cabin felt smaller now, heavier. Simone reached for her phone and began typing a new message to Daniel Brooks. Flight 472. Discriminatory language used by lead FA. Documenting. Prepare response plan. She put the phone down, her hands steady. She had no intention of causing a scene for the sake of noise. She believed in precision. If Colin wanted to play this out in front of witnesses, then she would let him. At the front of the cabin. Lena took a step toward them, then stopped. She could feel the weight of the hierarchy pressing on her. Speaking up now would mean challenging her superior in front of passengers, something she had been warned about in training. Still, she lingered close enough to hear every word. Colin cleared his throat and addressed Simone again, but his tone was sharper now. "Refusing to follow crew instructions can result in removal from the flight." "Which instruction?" she asked. "Relocating to your reassigned seat." Simone tilted her head. "Is this about safety or about your idea of who belongs in first class?" His mouth opened, then closed. He glanced toward the cockpit, then back to her. "I'll be back," he said, and walked away. When he disappeared behind the curtain, the cabin seemed to exhale. Tasha leaned forward slightly. "Excuse me," she said quietly. "Do you mind if I keep recording? I think people should see this." Simone looked at her for a moment. "That's your choice. It's already live," Tasha admitted. "I'm streaming to my followers. There are a few thousand watching right now." Simone gave the faintest nod. "Then make sure you capture everything." Tasha's eyes lit with a mix of outrage and purpose. "Believe me, I will." From the galley, Lena approached with a tray of mixed nuts and a glass of water. She set them down gently. "I'm sorry you're experiencing this," she whispered. Simone's eyes softened. "You've done nothing wrong, Lena." The younger woman straightened, glancing toward the curtain. "If you need anything, just signal me." When Lena returned to her station, Colin came back into the cabin. His stride was deliberate, the manifest now replaced by a small notepad. He stopped beside Simone's seat. "Ma'am, I'm making a note in the flight report that you refused to comply with the seat reassignment. This will be reviewed by the airline." Simone almost smiled. "Yes, it will." He looked momentarily thrown by her calmness, then pressed on. "For now, I expect you to conduct yourself appropriately." "I have," she said simply. The tension was almost tangible now. Passengers shifted in their seats, pretending to read, pretending to work, but their eyes kept sliding back toward row 2. Simone opened her notebook and wrote a line in neat, deliberate handwriting. Time, location, direct quote, "People like you." She underlined it once, then closed the cover. Colin lingered a moment longer, then turned on his heel and walked back toward the galley. Simone could feel his frustration radiating off him. She knew the type. He was used to authority going unchallenged. In business class, Tasha checked her phone. The stream had climbed past 20,000 viewers. Comments scrolled by in real time. Is this 2023 or 1963? She's handling this like a queen. Name the airline. We'll make sure they hear us. Tasha's fingers flew over the screen, adding a caption. First-class passenger being told to move because she doesn't fit the standards. Share this. Simone sat quietly, aware of the eyes, the camera, the growing digital audience. She wasn't sure yet how much of this was being seen outside the plane, but she had a feeling it was more than Colin realized. The intercom chimed again, and the captain's voice returned, measured and calm. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your patience. We'll be making an adjustment in the cabin before continuing meal service." Simone closed her eyes for a moment, breathing in slowly. She knew exactly what that meant. Colin had gone higher up the chain in hopes of forcing the move, but he was about to learn that she had her own chain of command, and it went far above his. She opened her eyes, her gaze steady, her mind already composing the next message she would send once she had the chance. This was no longer just a seat assignment dispute. This was a test of whether the values she had built into Aurora Air would be upheld by the people representing it. And if they weren't, she was prepared to act. The murmur of conversation faded as Colin disappeared into the galley again. Simone used the moment to slip her phone from her jacket pocket, keeping it low against her thigh. She tapped out a short message to Daniel Brooks. Flight 472, First Class. Lead FA escalating removal. Documenting all interactions. Initiate watch on passenger social feeds. She hit send and slid the phone back into her pocket. She knew Daniel would understand the coded language. He would begin monitoring for any live content and alert her if the incident was already spreading beyond the cabin. Simone took another sip of water. She could feel her pulse steady, her mind settling into that calm, precise mode she had cultivated over decades in business. She had always believed that decisive action required composure first. Anger could be useful later, but not now. Now she needed to observe, to gather, to plan. Lena passed through the cabin with a basket of warm towels. She paused at Simone's row, offering one with both hands. Their eyes met briefly. "Thank you," Simone said softly. The young woman's gaze shifted toward the galley curtain, then back. "If you need anything, I'm right there." Simone gave the faintest nod. Lena moved on, her posture as disciplined as if she were balancing a book on her head, but her eyes betrayed the tension she carried. In business class. Tasha Monroe adjusted her phone's angle, careful not to draw too much attention. The stream had passed 30,000 live viewers. Comments poured in faster than she could read them. Who is she? She's so calm. Name and shame the airline. Get her name. We'll make sure this blows up. Tasha typed quickly. Passenger in 2A, Aurora Air, First Class. told to move because she doesn't fit the standards. Stay tuned. At the front, the galley curtain stirred. Colin emerged again, but this time his steps were slower. He stopped at Simone's seat, holding a thin sheet of paper. "Ma'am, for the record, I'm documenting that you've refused crew instructions to relocate. This is being filed in the flight log." Simone glanced at the paper, but made no move to take it. "Then make sure you file my response as well. I am seated according to my purchase ticket, and I have not been given a safety-related reason to move." His eyes narrowed slightly. "I'm trying to avoid involving security upon arrival." Simone's tone did not change. "I'm sure you are." He stood there for a moment longer, as if waiting for her to relent, then turned on his heel and walked away. She watched him disappear back into the galley, the paper still in his hand. Simone's phone vibrated once. She pulled it out and saw a message from Daniel. "Live video from cabin trending. Over 40K views. Recommend we activate protocol before landing." Her thumb hovered over the keyboard. She typed one word, "standby." She closed her eyes for a moment, letting the hum of the engines wash over her. This was exactly the kind of moment she had built Aurora Air to prevent. And yet here it was, unfolding in her own flagship route. It told her something about how culture could shift in small, imperceptible ways until it became something she barely recognized. She opened her eyes to find Lena standing near her row again, pretending to adjust a storage compartment. "He's speaking with the captain," Lena murmured without looking at her. "I think he's trying to get approval to have you removed." Simone's lips curved slightly. "That would be interesting." "Are you going to tell him who you are?" Lena asked. "Not yet." Lena looked like she wanted to say more, but Colin's voice called her from the galley. She stepped away quickly. Simone leaned back, thinking. If Colin succeeded in framing her as a disruptive passenger, the arrival could be unpleasant. But if she acted now, she could turn the situation to reveal far more than just one flight attendant's bias. She reached for her phone again and opened a secure chat with Victor Chen, Aurora Air's HR director. "Victor, prepare to meet Flight 472 at JFK Gate upon arrival. Bring 2 security from corporate. This is a leadership matter." The reply came almost instantly. "Understood. ETA 90 minutes. I will message when we're on approach." She locked the phone and placed it in her tote, her hand brushing the edge of her leather-bound notebook. She opened it, flipping back to the page she had been writing on earlier. She added a new line, "Contact Lena Park post-flight. Potential witness. In business class." Tasha adjusted her phone again, catching a glimpse of Colin speaking to the captain just outside the cockpit door. She zoomed in, the image a bit grainy in the low cabin light, but clear enough to capture his expression, tight-lipped, focused. The chat on her stream lit up. "Is that the lead FA talking to the pilot? This is getting serious. He's trying to spin it. Someone tag the news." Tasha glanced at Simone, still sitting upright, calm, her hands folded neatly in her lap. She was struck by the contrast. Most people under this kind of pressure would fidget, snap back, raise their voice. Simone looked as if she were in a meeting she intended to win. The intercom chimed again. "Ladies and gentlemen, we appreciate your patience. We will be commencing beverage service shortly." Colin stepped back into the cabin, his face composed, but his eyes cool. He began serving drinks to the other first-class passengers, greeting them with easy warmth. When he reached Simone's row, he placed a small glass of sparkling water on her tray without a word. She lifted it slightly in thanks. "Mr. Mercer," she said quietly. "Yes." Ma'am, when we land, I'd like you to remain nearby. We'll be having a discussion. His brow furrowed. About what you'll see. He hesitated, then moved on to the next passenger, his smile returning for them as if nothing had passed between them. Simone took a slow sip of the sparkling water, the carbonation sharp against her tongue. She glanced toward the curtain separating first class from business, where Tasha was still recording. She gave the faintest nod. Tasha nodded back, understanding without words. An hour remained before landing. Simone used the time to make small notes, not just about Colin's words, but about the passengers who had witnessed them. She noted their seat numbers, their reactions, the subtle shifts in their expressions. As the cabin lights dimmed for the evening meal, she felt the weight of what was coming settle over her, not as dread, but as readiness. This was no longer about her seat. It was about the integrity of the company she had built and the message it sent to every passenger who boarded one of its planes. When Lena came by to clear glasses, Simone spoke just loud enough for her to hear. "Thank you for your professionalism." Lena gave a small, quick smile. "I wish I could do more." "You already have," Simone said. The last hour passed quietly, but the undercurrent of tension never left. Simone could feel it in the glances, the silence between words, the way Colin avoided meeting her eyes now, as the captain announced their descent into New York. Simone sent one more message to Victor Chen, Gate 17. "Be visible when door opens. Bring documents." She powered down her phone and placed it in her tote. The wheels touched down with a smooth, heavy thud, the reverse thrust rumbling through the cabin. Simone exhaled slowly. When the aircraft rolled to the gate and the seatbelt sign chimed off, Colin stepped into the aisle as if to direct passengers. He looked toward Simone's row, but she was already standing, her tote in hand. She gave him a calm, almost pleasant smile. "Let's go." The chime for disembarking rang, and passengers began reaching for their bags. Overhead compartments creaked open, the shuffle of luggage wheels and zippers filling the cabin. Colin stood by the first-class curtain, directing traffic with a smile for everyone except Simone. She remained in her seat, hands resting on the tote in her lap, waiting until the aisle was nearly clear. She could see Victor Chen through the small opening at the aircraft door. He stood just beyond the jet bridge, flanked by two men in dark suits. Their posture was relaxed, but there was no mistaking their authority. Colin glanced toward the door, then back at Simone. "If you'll come with me, ma'am, we can discuss this in the gate area." She rose smoothly, stepping into the aisle with a kind of unhurried grace that seemed to slow the movement of everyone around her. Passengers in business class were still gathering their belongings, and a few recognized her from the incident. Some avoided her gaze. Others met it with quiet solidarity. Tasha Monroe kept her phone angled low, still streaming. Her audience had swelled past 50,000 viewers. Comments scrolled in a blur. "She's walking off the plane now. Is that security waiting for her? Something's about to happen." Colin led the way down the narrow aisle. His tone clipped as he greeted the remaining passengers. Simone followed, the hum of the engines now replaced by the hiss of the air system and the faint metallic echo of the jet bridge beyond the door. As they stepped onto the bridge, the air changed cooler, sharper, tinged with the faint scent of jet fuel. Victor Chen was there, his expression unreadable. He gave Simone a small nod, then turned to Colin. "Mr. Mercer, I'm Victor Chen, Director of Human Resources for Aurora Air Group. We need to speak with you." Colin blinked. "HR. Why is HR? Let's step aside," Victor said. His tone left no room for debate. Simone stood quietly to the side, watching. She didn't speak yet. She didn't need to. The balance had already shifted, and Colin could feel it. Passengers stepping off the plane glanced at the scene, some pausing long enough to realize this wasn't routine. Colin tried to recover his composure. "Is this about the seating?" "Because I was following protocol." Victor's voice was steady. "We'll review what you believe protocol to be. Right now, I have a few questions." Simone caught the flicker of confusion in Colin's eyes as he looked between her and Victor. He didn't know yet, not fully, but he would. Lena emerged from the aircraft behind them, her eyes darting between Colin and Simone. She slowed, as if unsure whether to pass or stay. Simone gave her the smallest nod, a silent reassurance. Lena's shoulders eased, and she moved toward the terminal. Tasha came through next, phone still in hand. She positioned herself a few feet away, pretending to check her messages but angling the camera to catch the exchange. Victor opened a slim folder and glanced at the first page. "Mr. Mercer, are you aware that Flight 472 is operated by Aurora Air Group's flagship division?" Colin frowned. "Yes, of course. And that your conduct represents not only the crew, but the company's values." "I do," Colin said cautiously. Victor closed the folder. "Then you should also know who you've been addressing." Simone stepped forward then, her voice calm, her gaze steady. "Mr. Mercer, my name is Dr. Simone Hayes. I am the Chief Executive Officer of Aurora Air Group." The words hit like a drop of ink in clear water, spreading through the moment until every movement in the jet bridge seemed to slow. Colin's mouth opened, but no sound came out. The hum of the ventilation system filled the silence. "You!" He started, then stopped. "You're the CEO." "Yes," Simone said simply. "And I've just spent the last 2 hours observing how you choose to represent this company." Tasha's phone captured his expression, the flush rising in his cheeks, the stiffening of his posture. Her viewers exploded in the chat. "She's the CEO. Oh, he's done. This is better than TV." Colin glanced at Victor as if for confirmation, but Victor only said, "That's correct." Simone's voice remained even. "You told me I didn't fit the standards for first class. You suggested I'd be more comfortable elsewhere. You ignored my ticketed seat and attempted to reassign me without cause." Colin's jaw worked as if he might defend himself, but the words failed him. "Mr. Mercer," Victor said, "we have received a live stream of this incident viewed by tens of thousands of people. We will be conducting a full review, beginning now." Colin swallowed. "I didn't know who she was." Simone's eyes narrowed slightly. "That's not the problem. The problem is that it would have been acceptable to you if I had been anyone else." For a moment, no one spoke. Passengers continued down the jet bridge, glancing over at the scene. The 2 security staff shifted subtly, creating a small barrier that kept the flow moving. Victor gestured toward a side door. "Let's continue this in a private area." Colin followed, his shoulders tight, his steps quick. Simone walked behind them, her pace measured. She knew Tasha was still recording. That was fine. The public part of this wasn't over. But there were details better handled behind closed doors. In the small conference room just off the gate, Victor closed the door and took a seat across from Colin. Simone remained standing. "I'd like to hear your version," Victor said. Colin shifted in his chair. "She boarded late. I boarded during my assigned group," Simone said. Her voice cut clean through his sentence. Colin's eyes flicked to her, then back to Victor. "She didn't match the manifest profile for first class." Victor's brow furrowed. "Manifest profile, I mean. We usually have certain expectations for." Colin stopped himself. realizing the trap in his own words. Simone stepped closer. For what? Mr. Mercer. For who gets to sit in the seat they paid for? His mouth opened and closed again, but no answer came. Victor set his folder on the table. Mr. Mercer, we will be suspending you from duty pending the outcome of this review. Colin sat back, the fight draining from his posture. I was protecting the atmosphere in the cabin. No, Simone said quietly. You were protecting your own prejudice. The room was silent except for the distant hum of airport announcements beyond the door. Victor stood. You'll hand in your company credentials before leaving this terminal. You'll be contacted regarding the investigation. Colin rose slowly, avoiding Simone's eyes. Without another word, he left the room, the door closing softly behind him. Victor turned to Simone. Do you want to make this public tonight? Simone considered for a moment. She could feel the weight of what had just happened, the watching eyes. The recording still lived somewhere beyond that door. Not yet, she said. We'll do this right. We'll show exactly what happened and why it matters. Victor nodded. I'll have the security footage pulled and copies of all witness statements. Start with Lena Park. Simone said. She saw everything. As they stepped back into the terminal, Tasha was waiting. She didn't hide her phone now. Dr. Hayes, the stream has over 70,000 viewers. People are asking for your comment. Simone met her gaze, the calm still in her voice. Tell them we're addressing it, and tell them this discrimination has no place in the skies. Not in my company. Not anywhere. By the time Simone reached the private lounge near the gate, her phone was buzzing nonstop. The notifications rolled in like a tide she could not hold back. Mentions on social media, tagged posts, direct messages from colleagues who were already aware something had happened. She sank into a leather armchair, placed her tote by her side, and opened the feed on her phone. There it was. Tasha's live stream, saved and reposted on multiple platforms. The video was short but damning. Colin's voice was clear enough for anyone to hear. People like you are usually happier in sections that better match their travel needs. The comment threads were relentless. So this is how Aurora Air treats paying passengers. She handled it like a queen. Boycott until they fix this. Simone scrolled past the comments, watching how quickly the numbers climbed. 70,000 views had already doubled in less than an hour. Influencers were sharing it. Travel bloggers were dissecting it. Civil rights advocates were tagging news outlets. Victor stepped into the lounge, closing the door behind him. It's spreading faster than I expected. We've already had calls from PR asking for an immediate statement. I'm not ready to give them one, Simone said. Not until we've set the tone ourselves. He took the seat across from her. Do you want to suspend all crew from that flight until we finish the review? Not yet. Only Mercer. Lena Park stays. She'll be important when we address this. Victor nodded, tapping a note into his tablet. Media's going to want you live by morning. Simone glanced at the clock. It was just after 9 p. In New York. That meant the morning shows would already be planning their segments. Let them wait, she said. We'll control the narrative, not chase it. Her phone buzzed again, a call from Daniel Brooks. She answered immediately. Daniel, Simone. You're on every platform right now, Daniel said. His tone was steady but urgent. I've seen the full clip. It's clear. There's no way to spin it as a misunderstanding. That's the point, Simone replied. We're not going to soften it. I'm drafting a statement for internal staff. You'll need to decide if we do a same-day public release or wait until after we've met with legal. Wait until after. she said. "I want to see all the footage. Not just Tasha's video. You're going to have allies speaking out whether you want them to or not," Daniel warned. "Civil rights groups are already tagging Aurora Air." Simone thought for a moment. "Then we'll give them something worth amplifying." When she hung up, Victor leaned forward. "What's the play?" "We investigate thoroughly," Simone said. "We address the public on our terms, and we make it clear this isn't about a CEO protecting her ego. It's about a company protecting every passenger." Out in the terminal, the last of the passengers from Flight 472 had dispersed. The gate was quiet again, but the noise online was deafening. Hashtags had multiplied. Aurora bias. People like you. Sky belongs to all. Simone knew those words would follow the company until they were addressed head-on. She opened her secure company channel and recorded a short message to all senior leadership. "I was a passenger on Flight 472 this evening. During boarding and in flight, I experienced conduct from a lead flight attendant that was discriminatory and unacceptable. We are initiating a full investigation. This will be handled transparently, and we will reinforce that Aurora Air stands for inclusive excellence. You will receive further directives within 24 hours. She sent it, then set the phone down and closed her eyes for a moment. The exhaustion was there, but so was the steel she had relied on her entire career. This was not the first storm she had faced, but it was one of the most public. Victor checked his tablet again. "We've had 12 reservation cancellations in the last hour. People are citing the video. They'll come back," Simone said. "If we handle this right, they'll come back stronger." In another part of the terminal, Tasha was still fielding messages from her audience. Her following had ballooned by tens of thousands since the incident began. She had news producers asking for interviews, podcasts inviting her to talk about what she'd witnessed. She hesitated before answering any of them. The last thing she wanted was to make the story about her. It was about what had happened, and to whom. A notification popped up on her screen, a direct message from an account she recognized instantly. It was Simone. Just 2 words. "Thank you," Tasha typed back. "You handled it with more grace than I could have." Simone didn't reply, but Tasha didn't expect her to. She had the sense that the woman in 2A was already moving several steps ahead of the rest of them. By midnight, major news sites had picked up the story. Headlines ranged from blunt to sensational. Aurora Air CEO target of discrimination. On her own flight passenger records, flight attendants, people like you. Comment to airline CEO, viral video forces airline to address bias allegations. Simone read each one without flinching. She had long ago stopped letting headlines rattle her. What mattered was the follow-through. Her phone rang again. This time it was Lena. Simone answered, her tone softer. "Lena, Dr. Hayes, I just wanted to say, I'm sorry I didn't speak up in the moment." "You had your reasons," Simone said gently, "and you'll have a chance to speak now. If you want it." "I do," Lena said quickly. "I saw everything." "Good," Simone replied. "HR will contact you tomorrow. Tell them exactly what you saw and heard." Lena hesitated. "Mr. Mercer has been here a long time. People think he's untouchable." "Not anymore," Simone said. When the call ended, she leaned back in her chair. Victor was still across from her, studying her expression. "You're not shaken," he observed. Simone shook her head. "No, I'm focused. This isn't just a PR problem. It's a culture problem, and culture problems start at the top." Victor looked at her for a long moment, then said, "You're going to make an example of him. I'm going to make an example of what happens when we fail our own values," she corrected. Outside the lounge windows, The lights of the runway stretched into the distance. Planes came and went in steady rhythm, oblivious to the uproar in the digital world. But Simone knew that by morning, Aurora Air's name would be in millions of feeds, and by the end of the week, the way her company handled this would be studied by every competitor in the industry. She rose, collected her tote, and looked at Victor. "Let's get some rest. Tomorrow, we start." The next morning, Simone's hotel suite overlooked the East River. Early sunlight spilled through the tall windows, catching the steam rising from her untouched coffee. She sat at the small glass table, phone in one hand, pen in the other, reviewing the first overnight briefing from Daniel Brooks. The report was thorough, links to every major repost of Tasha's video, screen captures of trending hashtags, a bullet-point summary of media requests. The last line caught her attention. Clip has been viewed 4.3 million times across platforms. Public sentiment strongly in your favor. She set the phone down, her mind already moving to the next step. Public sentiment was useful, but it wasn't enough. She wanted something lasting, a response that went beyond firing one person. Her laptop chimed with an incoming call. Victor Chen's face appeared, framed by the muted beige of his office wall. "We've secured the full cabin footage from Flight 472, he said. "You'll want to see it." "Send it to me directly," Simone replied. A few minutes later, the file was open on her screen. Multiple camera angles, crisp audio. She watched the scene unfold exactly as she had lived it. Colin leaning over her seat. The clipped tone, the telltale pause before "people like you." Lena glancing over from the galley, Tasha angling her phone. She watched the other passengers too, their small reactions, the way silence spread like a current through the cabin. It was all there, undeniable. When the video ended, she called Daniel. "I want you to prepare the formal termination paperwork," she said, "but not just for Colin." Daniel's voice was steady. "Who else? Anyone in that chain of command who reviewed crew training and let this culture fester." Simone said, "I want an internal audit of every complaint filed in the past 5 years. "That will shake the tree," Daniel warned. "That's the point." After the call, she opened a new document and began drafting a memo to the board. It was concise, a summary of the incident, the evidence, and her intended course of action. The last line read, "We will address this not as a PR inconvenience, but as a systemic breach of our values." By mid-morning, the media requests had tripled. Morning talk shows replayed the clip in rotation, cutting to panels of analysts discussing bias in travel. Former flight attendants called in to share similar stories. The words, "people like you," had taken on a life of their own, printed in bold across headlines. Simone stayed silent. Every hour she refused to comment seemed to increase curiosity. She was giving the story room to breathe before stepping in to direct it. At 11, Victor arrived at her suite with a thick folder. "Lena Park's statement," he said, placing it on the table. Simone read it carefully. Lena had been precise. She detailed Colin's words, his tone, and his body language. She confirmed that no safety or operational reason had been given for the seat reassignment. She even noted her own hesitation to speak up and why. "I was afraid of retaliation." Lena had written, "but I also knew it was wrong." Simone closed the folder. "She'll be protected. In fact, she'll be promoted." Victor raised an eyebrow. "Promoted?" "Yes," Simone said. "We're not just removing the bad, we're rewarding the good." Her phone buzzed. A text from Tasha. "CNN wants me tonight." "Should I say yes?" Simone typed back, "Say yes. Tell the truth. Don't worry about me." By the time the afternoon light softened, Simone had built the framework for what would happen next. She called Victor and Daniel onto a joint video call. "Tomorrow morning, we hold a press conference at headquarters," she said. "We'll present the facts, the video, the policy changes, and I'll make the announcement personally." Daniel nodded. "And Colin. By the time I step up to that podium, he'll already have his termination letter," Simone said, "along with the names of any manager who failed to act on prior complaints." Victor exhaled slowly. "This will be messy. It will be necessary," Simone said. That night, in a quiet corner of a Manhattan restaurant, Simone sat alone at a table set for two. She was waiting for someone, not a lawyer, not a board member, but a pilot. Captain Aaron Whitfield had commanded Flight 472. He arrived on time, in casual clothes, his expression neutral. "I didn't know you were on my flight," he said, sitting down. "I know," Simone replied. "That's part of why I wanted to talk." Aaron leaned forward. "I never authorized Mercer to move you. He told me there was a disruptive passenger in first class. He never said it was you." Simone studied him for a moment. "Would you have handled it differently if he had Aaron's gaze was steady?" "Yes. And I would have wanted to know why he was making that request in the first place." "Then you'll have your chance," Simone said. "You'll be part of the internal review." They spoke for half an hour, Aaron giving her insight into crew dynamics and how authority could be abused in flight. By the time they left, Simone knew she would keep him in his role, but also make him part of the cultural reset she was planning. Back at the hotel, she sent one final message to Victor confirm termination meeting for Mercer at 8 a.m. Have security present. She closed her laptop and stood by the window, watching the city lights scatter across the water. The trap was set. All that remained was to spring it. The next morning, the Aurora Air Group headquarters in Midtown buzzed with a nervous, electric energy. Security guards in dark suits stood at the revolving glass doors, screening every person who entered. Cameras were already set up in the lobby, cordoned off by velvet ropes. Staff passed by in hushed conversation, eyes darting toward the main conference hall. Upstairs, Simone Hayes stood in front of a mirror in her private office. Her black blazer was crisp, the silver pendant at her neck catching the soft light. She didn't look angry. She looked steady, centered. Victor Chen stepped in quietly. "Mercer's here," he said. "Security has him in the waiting area." "Has he been told why Simone asked?" "No, only that he's meeting with HR and executive leadership." "Good," Simone replied. "Let's keep it that way." At precisely 8 o'clock, she walked into the executive conference room. The long table gleamed under the recessed lighting. At one end sat Colin Mercer, flanked by 2 HR representatives. His uniform was pressed, but the set of his jaw was tense. He looked at her with the same flicker of defiance she'd seen on the plane, but there was uncertainty now, too. "Mr. Mercer," Simone began, her voice even, "thank you for coming in this morning." He leaned back slightly in his chair. "I was told there's been some misunderstanding." Simone took the seat opposite him. "This isn't a misunderstanding. This is an investigation, and it's concluded." Colin blinked. Already Victor placed a folder in front of him. Inside, you'll find a transcript of the cabin footage from Flight 472 witness statements from crew and passengers, and a record of prior complaints regarding your conduct. Colin's mouth tightened. "Prior complaints?" "Yes," Simone said, "some of which were dismissed without proper review. That failure ends today." She let the silence hang for a moment, the weight of her words filling the space. "Effective immediately." She continued. Your employment with Aurora Air Group is terminated. Colin's face flushed. You're firing me? For what? For following protocol. You weren't following protocol, Simone said quietly. You were following your bias. And you did it in front of passengers, crew, and now millions of viewers. He glanced around the room, searching for someone to back him. No one spoke. You can't just, I can, Simone interrupted, her tone still calm. And I have. Victor slid another document across the table, the official termination letter. Colin stared at it, but didn't reach for a pen. This isn't the end of it, he muttered. Simone stood. For your sake. I hope it is, because the alternative is much worse. Security entered, 2 men standing just far enough behind him to make the point clear. Colin pushed back his chair and stood, his posture stiff. Without another word, he walked out, escorted toward the elevators. When the door closed, Simone exhaled once, then turned to Victor. Is the press set up? They're ready. 10 minutes later. She stepped onto the small stage in the main conference hall. Rows of reporters filled the seats. Cameras clicked, microphones angled forward. Behind her, a large screen displayed the Aurora Air logo in clean white against deep blue. Good morning, she began, her voice carrying easily through the space. Yesterday evening, I was a passenger on Flight 472 from Los Angeles to New York. During boarding and throughout the flight, I was subjected to discriminatory conduct from a member of our cabin crew. That conduct violated both the letter and the spirit of Aurora Air's values. She paused just long enough for the murmurs to ripple through the crowd. I want to be clear, she continued. This is not about who I am as an individual. This is about who we are as a company. Every passenger, regardless of race, background, or appearance, deserves to be treated with dignity and respect. Anything less is unacceptable. On the screen behind her, the cabin footage played. The room went silent. Colin's words, people like you, echoed from the speakers. The shot of Lena glancing over. The glimpse of Tasha's phone capturing the moment. When the clip ended, Simone faced the cameras again. The employee in question has been terminated effective immediately. We are also reviewing the actions of any supervisor who failed to address prior complaints. A reporter in the front row raised his hand. Dr. Hayes, what do you say to those who believe this is just damage control because the incident happened to you? I say this, Simone replied. If it had happened to anyone else, it still would have been wrong. The only difference is that this time, I was in a position to act quickly and decisively, and I will use that position to make sure no one else has to endure it. Another hand shot up. Will there be policy changes? Yes, Simone said. Effective this week. We're implementing a revised crew training program focused on bias awareness, communication, and passenger rights. We are also establishing an anonymous reporting line for both passengers and employees. Her gaze swept the room, steady and unflinching. This is not a PR exercise. This is a course correction, and it's only the beginning. When the conference ended, she stepped off the stage and into a side corridor where Victor was waiting. How'd it play? She asked. Strong, he said. The live feed's already trending. Most of the questions are about what comes next. Good, she said, because what comes next will matter more than what happened yesterday. Her phone buzzed again. A message from Tasha. Just watch the conference. Thank you, Simone typed back. Thank you for making sure the world saw it. As she left the building, the crisp November air hit her face. Reporters still called out from the sidewalk, their voices blending with the honk of traffic. But she didn't stop. The statement had been made. The action had been taken. Now came the harder part, changing the culture that had allowed it in the first place. The day after the press conference, the mood inside Aurora Air's headquarters was unlike anything Simone had seen in her tenure. On the surface, there was quiet efficiency phones ringing, keyboards clacking, assistants moving briskly down the hallways. But beneath that, she could feel it. Conversations cut off when she approached. Sideways glances in the elevator, a shift in the air. By mid-morning, Victor stepped into her office carrying 2 stacks of folders. "These are the first round of department reports," he said. "Operations, customer service, crew relations." Some of the department heads are hesitant about what Simone asked. "About the scope of your reforms," Victor said carefully. "They agree with the principle, but they're pushing back on mandatory bias training for all staff, especially senior crew." Simone set her pen down and leaned back. "Let me guess, the pushback is mostly from people who've been here the longest." Victor nodded. "Some of them are framing it as an attack on their professional judgment." Simone stood and walked to the window, looking out at the jagged skyline. When judgment has failed, it needs to be recalibrated. They can either adjust or find another airline to work for. The phone on her desk buzzed. Her assistant's voice came through. "Dr. Hayes, the board chair is on line 2. He says it's urgent." She picked up. "Richard, Simone," Richard began, his voice low and even. "I watched your conference yesterday. Strong delivery. But some board members think you moved too fast on the termination." "I didn't move fast," Simone said. "I moved on evidence. There's a difference." "You've made a lot of people nervous," Richard said. "I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm saying the fallout might be bigger than you expect." Simone's grip tightened on the phone. "If the fallout of doing the right thing is that some people leave, I'll help them pack their offices." There was a pause on the other end. Then Richard sighed. "Just be ready." The next board meeting could be rough. When the call ended, Simone sat in silence for a moment. She'd been through high-pressure negotiations, shareholder disputes, even a hostile takeover attempt. But this was different. This was personal, both to her and to the company's soul. An alert popped up on her screen. Media coverage of the press conference had reached international outlets. A BBC headline read, "U.S. Airline CEO fires staff after experiencing discrimination on her own flight." A comment section was filled with praise, debate, and more than a few people sharing similar stories. The praise wasn't universal. One opinion column on a major business site accused her of emotional overreach and jeopardizing operational stability. Another called it a PR stunt in an era of outrage culture. Simone scrolled past the noise. She'd learned long ago that leadership wasn't about pleasing everyone. It was about standing where it mattered, even when the ground shook. By noon, she was in a meeting with a newly formed Culture Review Task Force. Around the table sat representatives from HR, legal, operations, and marketing. At the far end, Lena Park sat nervously, a notepad in front of her. Simone began. "You've all seen the footage. You've read the statements. You know why we're here. This is not about salvaging an image. This is about rewriting the standard." Lena raised her hand slightly. "Dr. Hayes, some of the crew I worked with last week told me they support the changes, but they're afraid to speak publicly. They've seen what happens when people challenge the old guard." Simone met her gaze. "That's why you're here, to show that speaking up has value, and to show others that they'll be backed, not punished." Marketing chimed in, suggesting a public-facing campaign to highlight diverse crew stories. Legal added a caution they would need to navigate privacy concerns and avoid framing it as a direct response to the incident, to prevent future lawsuits from citing bias. Simone listened, weighing each angle. We'll do it carefully, but we will do it. If we want the public to trust us, they need to see the change, not just hear about it. After the meeting, Lena lingered by the doorway. I just wanted to say, thank you for not letting this fade. Simone smiled faintly. It's not kindness, Lena, it's responsibility. That evening, as she left the building, a small group of employees stood outside smoking and talking in low voices. One of them, a senior flight attendant she recognized, made no effort to hide the glare as she walked past. The hostility wasn't loud, but it was there, threads pulling against the fabric she was trying to weave. Back in her apartment, she sat at the kitchen counter with her laptop open. The city hummed faintly through the glass. She pulled up the internal message boards, scanning crew discussions. Some were supportive, others skeptical. And then she saw one post that caught her attention. It was anonymous, but clearly from a crew member. The post read, I've worked here 12 years. I've seen the same kind of behavior. Dr. Hayes faced happen to passengers who didn't have the power to fight back. Maybe this is finally the change we needed, or maybe it'll just fade like the last time. Simone stared at the words for a long time. The last time. She typed a note to herself. Find out what happened before. Her mind spun back to her early days in aviation, when she was just another passenger in a crowded terminal, unseen, unheard. Back then, she'd promised herself that if she ever had the power to change the way people were treated, she'd take it. No hesitation, no compromise. She closed the laptop, stood, and poured herself a glass of water. The reflection in the kitchen window showed the same steady eyes she'd seen in the mirror that morning. She knew tomorrow would bring more resistance, more calls, more quiet battles in conference rooms and inboxes. But she also knew something else change had already started. The glass tower was rattling, and if it cracked, it would be because she'd struck where it counted. Simone arrived at headquarters earlier than usual, long before the morning rush filled the hallways. The glass lobby was quiet, echoing with the soft hum of ventilation. She wanted the stillness. It helped her think. In her office, she placed her bag on the credenza and opened her laptop. She had slept little, her mind turning over the anonymous post from the night before. Maybe it'll just fade like the last time. That phrase had lodged itself in her thoughts like a burr. She called Victor. I need everything you can find on previous internal discrimination cases, the ones that never made it to public view. There was a pause on the other end. That could be a lot of files. Then start with the most serious. Go back at least 10 years. 2 hours later, Victor arrived with a large envelope, the kind used for legal exhibits. He set it on her desk with a cautionary look. Some of this is ugly. Simone, and most of it never saw daylight. She opened the envelope. Inside were summaries of cases filed by passengers and crew alike. Some were eerily similar to her own incident seat reassignments without cause, curt dismissals, staff siding with certain passengers over others based on appearance. Many were labeled resolved in the database, though the notes revealed that resolution often meant quietly rebooking someone or issuing a travel voucher. Then she found it. A report from 5 years ago. A black woman, a professor at a Midwestern university, had been told by a senior flight attendant that her carry-on was too large for business class, even though it was within regulations. When she questioned it, she was removed from her seat and downgraded to economy. She filed a formal complaint. The investigation concluded there was insufficient evidence of bias. The crew member in question had been given a verbal reminder of customer service expectations. The professor, according to notes, never flew with Aurora again. Simone closed the file slowly, her chest tightening. She could almost hear the same clipped tone in her mind, see the same subtle dismissal in the body language. She called Daniel Brooks. "I need you to track down this passenger," she said, giving him the professor's name. "You're thinking of speaking with her?" Daniel asked. "Yes, and if she's willing. I want her story told." By early afternoon, Daniel had a number. Simone dialed it herself. The voice on the other end was cautious at first, but softened as Simone explained who she was and why she was calling. "I remember it," the professor said. "It was humiliating. And when they told me the complaint was resolved, I knew nothing would change. I didn't have the platform to fight it." "You do now," Simone said. "If you're open to it, I'd like to include your experience in our internal review and our public report." The professor hesitated, then agreed. "If it helps someone else avoid what I went through, I'll do it." When Simone hung up, she felt the quiet burn of resolve. This was bigger than Colin Mercer. This was about a pattern the company had buried under procedural language and polite denials. That evening, the Culture Review Task Force met again. Simone laid the old files out on the table, letting the weight of the paper speak first. "These are the cases we didn't fix," she said. "And some of the same people who failed to act on them are still in leadership positions." Murmurs went around the table. Lena's eyes widened as she read over one summary. "We're not just going to train people differently," Simone continued. "We're going to hold managers accountable for what they ignored. And we're going to reopen these cases not to punish for the sake of punishment, but to make amends." Marketing asked if that meant reaching out to past passengers. "Yes," Simone said. "We'll apologize. We'll offer restitution. And we'll make it clear that ignoring discrimination is itself a violation of our values." Victor looked uneasy. "You know the backlash this will cause internally. Some of these managers have been here since before the merger. They'll say you're dragging the company's name through the mud." "The mud is already there," Simone said. "We're just shining a light on it." After the meeting, Simone walked alone through the nearly empty halls. The walls were lined with framed photos of smiling crew members and jets catching the sun on the runway. She wondered how many of those smiles had been strained. How many stories had gone untold in these very corridors. Her phone buzzed with a message from Tasha. "Just saw a thread online. Passengers sharing old stories about Aurora. Your press conference is opening floodgates." Simone replied, "Good. The truth needs air." Later that night, she sat in her living room, city lights spilling across the floor. She thought about the professor she had called, about the way her voice had shifted from guarded to willing. She thought about Lena, finding the courage to speak up. And she thought about the silent majority in her company, the ones who saw and stayed quiet. She knew she couldn't change every mind, but she could change the rules, and rules, once written into policy and enforced, could reshape a culture one decision at a time. In that moment, the fatigue she'd been carrying all week felt lighter. Not gone, but lighter. Because she finally understood that the last time didn't have to happen again. Not if she made this fight bigger than herself. Tomorrow, she would tell the board exactly that. The boardroom at Aurora Air was designed to impress. A massive oval table sat under a chandelier of blown glass, its light scattering across polished wood. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city skyline. But today, the view felt irrelevant. Every chair was filled, and every gaze was fixed on Simone Hayes as she stood at the head of the table. Her presence was calm but undeniable. She had dressed simply, charcoal suit, white blouse, hair neatly pulled back. No theatrics, just the weight of evidence in the leather binder she carried. Richard, the board chair, cleared his throat. "We're here to address the aftermath of the Flight 472 incident and the actions taken by Dr. Hayes." His eyes flicked toward her. "Simone, you have the floor." She opened the binder and began distributing packets to each board member. "What you have in front of you is not just about Flight 472, she said. It's about a pattern, a history of unresolved discrimination complaints in this company. There was a shuffle of papers, brows furrowed. "These are internal cases from the last decade," she continued. "Many involve incidents similar to my own experience, passengers reassigned without justification, crew behavior that went unchecked, managers failing to follow through on investigations." One board member, a man in a navy suit named Caldwell, frowned. "Simone, some of these were closed years ago. We can't be expected to reopen every old complaint." "You can't change what happened," Simone said evenly, "but you can address how it was handled. Ignoring it is not a defense, it's a choice. And if we choose that again, we are complicit." Another member, Evelyn Shore, tapped the packet with a manicured nail. "You're proposing restitution for past passengers. That's unconventional." "It's ethical," Simone replied. "We market ourselves as an airline that values dignity and respect. That means living up to it, even when it's inconvenient." Caldwell leaned back, arms crossed. "And how much do you think this will cost us? In cash, in reputation, in legal exposure?" Simone met his gaze without flinching. "Less than the cost of another viral video showing that nothing has changed." A murmur rippled through the room. Some of the members avoided eye contact. Others were clearly considering her point. Richard spoke again. "Let's focus on the reforms you're proposing. Mandatory bias training for all staff, anonymous reporting lines, accountability measures for managers, and public acknowledgement of past failures. Is that correct?" "Yes," Simone said. "And I want the board's commitment to these actions in writing. No watered-down versions, no delays." "That's a tall order," Caldwell said. "It's the bare minimum," she replied. "From the far end of the table," Evelyn asked, "and what if the vote doesn't go your way?" Simone's voice stayed steady. "Then I'll hold a press conference tomorrow morning and tell the public that their trust in Aurora Air is misplaced. And I'll mean every word." The room went still. Even Richard's expression tightened. "That sounds like a threat," Caldwell said. "It's a promise," Simone corrected. "And if you think this is about me protecting my ego, you haven't been listening. This is about passengers like the professor, who was downgraded for questioning a crew member. It's about the families who've been humiliated on their way to vacations, the business travelers who've been dismissed because of how they look. I am done watching this company protect its own comfort at the expense of its principles." She let the silence hang. In the quiet, the city's hum seemed to press in through the glass. Richard finally broke it. "Let's take a vote. One by one." The board members raised their hands. Some did it slowly, as if weighing the consequences in real time. Others were quick, decisive. Caldwell's hand stayed down, his lips pressed tight. Evelyn hesitated, then raised hers. When the count was over, Richard looked at Simone. 8 in favor, 3 against. The reforms pass. There was no applause, just the scrape of chairs, the rustle of papers being gathered. As the members filed out, Caldwell lingered. "You've made powerful enemies today," he said quietly. Simone met his stare. "Then I must be doing something right." When the last of them had gone, Richard approached. "You won," he said, though his tone carried a note of caution. "This isn't a win," Simone replied. "It's the first step. Now we see if they follow through." She walked out of the boardroom and into the hall, where Victor was waiting. His expression told her he'd been listening through the cracked door. "They voted yes?" he asked. "They voted yes," she said. Victor exhaled. "Then we'd better get to work." As she stepped into the elevator, Simone caught her reflection in the mirrored walls. She saw the same calm resolve she'd carried onto Flight 472, the same steel she'd held in the press conference. But beneath it, she felt something else, a quiet satisfaction that the board had been forced to look at what they'd spent years ignoring. It wouldn't be easy. She knew Caldwell and those who'd voted against her would look for ways to undermine the reforms. She knew the resistance within the ranks would flare. But now, the rules were changing, and rules, once set, could be enforced. For the first time in days, Simone allowed herself a small smile as the elevator doors closed. Tomorrow, the real work would begin. 3 months later, Simone found herself in the quiet of Terminal C, walking toward Gate 18. The renovations at Aurora Air Headquarters were complete. Not in bricks and mortar, but in people and policy. The new culture review protocols were in place. Bias training was not just mandatory, but interactive. And anonymous reporting had already flagged and resolved 2 incidents that might once have been buried. She had spent those months in back-to-back meetings, interviews, and sometimes tense implementation reviews. There had been pushback, always would be, but the forward momentum was undeniable. She could see it in the way crew members addressed passengers, in the revised service scripts, and even in the tone of internal memos. Today's trip was different. No press, no entourage, just Simone, a small carry-on, and a ticket in first class. She had booked the flight quietly, wanting to see for herself if the reforms had taken root where they mattered most on the aircraft. At the gate, a middle-aged black couple stood ahead of her in line. The woman carried a designer tote, the man a garment bag. A young flight attendant with warm brown skin and a neat bun greeted them at the boarding door. "Welcome aboard, Mr. and Mrs. Daniels," she said, smiling genuinely. "Your seats are in 1A and 1B. Let me know if you need anything at all." Simone noticed the care in her voice, the eye contact, the ease. When Simone handed over her own boarding pass, the attendant's smile widened. "Dr. Hayes." "Welcome back." It caught her off guard. "You know me?" "Yes, ma'am," the attendant said softly. "We all do. And I wanted to say, thank you. I joined Aurora because I believed in what you said that day on the news." Simone's throat tightened just a little. That means a lot. "What's your name, Kayla?" the attendant said. "I'm only 6 months in, but it already feels different here. On board." Simone settled into her seat in 2A. The cabin was bright, the crew moving with quiet efficiency. Across the aisle, a young Latino father tried to secure a diaper bag under his seat while balancing a drowsy toddler. Without hesitation, another flight attendant knelt to help him, chatting with the child until she giggled. It wasn't perfect. Simone spotted a minor misstep when a crew member almost overlooked a passenger in a headscarf for the pre-departure drink order, but Kayla gently corrected it, making sure the passenger was addressed promptly and respectfully. As the plane taxied, Simone opened her tablet. The latest passenger satisfaction scores had just come in. Complaints about bias or discourtesy had dropped by more than half since the new policies were implemented. But numbers only told part of the story. Midway through the flight, she walked to the galley to stretch her legs. Kayla was there, pouring coffee for a passenger in the jump seat. "Can I ask you something?" Simone said when they were alone. "Of course." "How hard has it been to adjust to the new expectations?" Kayla thought for a moment. "It's not hard if you believe in them, but it takes practice." Some of the older crew members were resistant at first. Now, most of them are on board because they've seen the difference it makes. People are calmer, happier. We're not just serving passengers. We're actually connecting with them. Simone nodded. That was exactly what she had hoped to hear. When she returned to her seat, she found a folded napkin on her tray table. In neat handwriting, it read, "Saw what you did for this airline. Thank you." There was no name, just a simple note. As the plane began its descent, Simone gazed out the window at the sprawl of the city coming into view. She thought about the boardroom battle, the professor's voice on the phone, Lena's nervous courage, and even Caldwell's scowl. Every moment had been a thread in the fabric now taking shape. When the wheels touched down, there was the usual shuffle of passengers gathering their things. Simone stayed seated, letting the aisle clear. As she stepped off the plane, Kayla was there again. "Safe travels. Dr. Hayes," she said. Simone smiled. "Keep doing what you're doing." "Kayla, it matters." Back in the terminal, she paused for a moment before heading toward the exit. She watched a mix of passengers' families, business travelers, students with backpacks passing through, strangers bound by the simple, fragile expectation of being treated as equals. In that moment, she knew the fight wasn't over. Culture could shift, but it had to be protected. Policies could be written, but they had to be lived. The real victory wasn't in the vote or the headlines. It was in these small, human exchanges that happened every day in the aisles of a plane. She picked up her bag and walked toward the taxi stand. The reforms would need constant tending, and she was ready for that. Because leadership wasn't about the battles you fought, once it was about the standards you upheld, flight after flight, year after year. And as the cool evening air met her face, Simone Hayes knew that Aurora Air was no longer just an airline. It was a promise. Sometimes, the fight for justice doesn't start with a shout. It starts with a seat. Dr. Simone Hayes didn't just reclaim her place on Flight 472. She reclaimed the right for every passenger to be treated with dignity, no matter their skin color, status, or story. In her calm but relentless way, she proved that one person's resolve can rewrite an entire company's culture. But this story isn't just about one airline. It's about all of us. About how silence enables discrimination. About how choosing to speak up, even when it's uncomfortable, can shift the course of everyday life. So the next time you see someone treated unfairly, ask yourself, will you look away, or will you make it right? If this story moved you, if it made you think, if it made you hope, please like, share, and subscribe. Your support keeps these stories alive and spreads the message that equality is non-negotiable. We have more stories to tell, stories that will challenge you, inspire you, and remind you that the smallest actions can lead to the biggest changes. Stay with us. The next flight is about to board.